Hey everyone, my name is Harknee. I'm a techno and house music DJ and producer, and today I'm going to be showing you my new track White Russian and going through the DAW project. Let's go. So White Russian was my first attempt at dub techno. Having recently gotten into the genre, I felt that producing it wouldn't be too difficult. I suspect a lot of people think like this, as the genre is based around sort of a single chord with lots of reverb and quite a simple beats with only a little bit of automation and evolution throughout the track. But as I've gotten more into the genre, I've begun to realise that there's actually a lot more to it than that. You have to do quite a lot with the small little changes and the small little bits of evolution to keep the track interesting and keep the listener's attention. But anyway, let's move on to the track and start breaking it down. So what we'll do is we'll start with lead number 1 here, which sounds like this. Using the ES2, oscillators 2 and 3 are pitched up by 3 and 7 semitones. So what this does is that every time I play this patch, it plays a minor chord. So every note I play will be pitched specifically to be in a minor chord. The oscillators have also been slightly detuned just to create a bit more interest in the sound and make it sound maybe slightly more analog and less robotic and static. It's then going into a bandpass filter rather than using a low or a high pass. So whenever I create the automation throughout the track, this can help it as it has more potential to change the sound, add more variation, as it's affecting both the higher frequencies and the low frequencies. It also makes it sound a lot more distant, especially when coupled with reverb. You can really give that atmospheric and ambient sound that is very standard practice in dub techno. I've also used some analog as well to help to make the sound, the pitch of the sound sort of drift over time as well. And then the envelope is short attack, short decay, no sustain, and just a little bit of release. You get a very sort of stabby chord sound. So that's it for the ES2. Moving on to the processing on the channel. What we've got is the IVGI2, some overdrive, and some chorus. Now let's just turn all the effects off and show you what it sounds like on its own. Quite a simple sound, not too much going on there. Then we add some IVGI2 saturation. Then we add some overdrive. Sounds like there's a little bit of white noise towards the top end. Also, what the overdrive is doing, it's taking the attack of the sound and really pushing that as well, so it's giving it a harder impact. And then the secret sauce really for all of this is Acon Digital Multiply. It goes from being quite a monotone sound to suddenly being this really wide, bright, well, not bright, but very full-on sounding lead. Yeah, it's almost multiplying the sounds. So it sounds like you've got a couple of different layers of synths. I tend to use this on all of my leads. It makes each lead sound a lot more full and with a lot more body and character. And especially when coupled with the slight detuning of the oscillators and the sort of gliding of the pitch, which makes this sort of give it a wobble effect, which makes it even sound more interesting. Then moving on to the sends, number 1 is the tape delay, which is playing an 8th note dotted delay time. Rather than providing rhythm, what this does is add more atmosphere to the sound overall. If you listen, because it's not on the 4/4 beat, it adds a bit more sort of general atmosphere to the track, which is then being widened and moved around in the stereo field by Pancake and Ozone Imager, and it's given this sort of lo-fi effect by the isotope vinyl, and also with the warp effect as well. This is moving the pitch around as well, and because we got quite a few things on this delay channel, so much of the delay sounds in the background are slowly moving up and down in pitch. We can really hear it if I really turn it up. If you just use it subtly, you can create sort of a nice sort of moving, evolving sound, and it makes each delay sound slightly different. Then moving on to reverb number 2, which is just a platinum verb. Lots of delay time, lots of diffusion, massive room size. I originally just used the platinum verb just to see how, or just to get a basic idea of how the lead sound would sound with a long reverb on it, and I was going to change it for a more interesting reverb, something like Realm or the Space Designer. But as the track progressed, the platinum verb was just giving me the reverb sound that I needed for the track. And what I'm also doing is using a second delay, bus number 4, which is Valhalla's Supermassive. Again, using an 8th dotted delay time. But what this is doing is giving this lead in particular more impact, because the only thing on this channel, ignore the white noise, the only thing on this channel is this lead sound. As it only plays twice, sort of every 4 beats, as opposed to lots of little notes like the second lead is doing that we'll talk about in a second, I wanted it to stand out a bit more and have a bigger part in the song. So to make it sound more distinct, what I've done is given it its own, literally, supermassive delay. It's the same delay time, but there's just simply more of it. And I think this really helps the first lead stand out and have a bit more contrast in sort of status compared to the second lead. This is very much the daddy of the song, and then the second lead is very much playing a supportive role. At the very beginning of the delay tail, it almost sounds the supermassive delay almost sounds as loud as the original sound. As for the automation on this track, I've got the filter cutoff, which is moving the band pass up and down. I'm automating the delay time for the supermassive reverb, and I'm automating the decay of the sound as well. As you can hear here, this is really spelled out quite nicely here. So right there, you've got 2 very distinct parts of the sound. As it slowly builds up, the sound slowly gets bigger and bigger as there's more and more decay. The sound slowly gets bigger and bigger. There's more of it. There's more presence, and as the filter as well is slowly moving further and further towards the higher frequencies. There's more higher frequencies. It's becoming more present, giving the sound 2. Well, maybe even 3 when you come down to this part of the track as well. It has maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 distinct personalities throughout the track. And to me, that makes a song a lot more interesting whenever you've got a sound evolving like this throughout a 4 to 5 minute track. And it really negates the need to add lots of different layers to a sound, lots of different other melodies, lots of other different sound effects or whatever. If you've got just one sound that's changing a lot over the course of a track, it makes this, to me anyway, it makes a track way more interesting. It's the whole idea of less is more. Then moving up to the top, we have the kick and the percussion, which sound like this. Now this was originally, well actually we know what it is a loop from the Apple Loops. I just dragged it into the project at the beginning just to get a feel of what the dub chord would sound like with some beats and some percussion behind it. I was going to get rid of it and replace it with my own percussion, as I'm not really the biggest fan of sort of dragging in loops into your project and using them without really any changes. But as the track progressed, it seemed to fit in with the track quite nicely and fit the groove that I was going for. So yeah, the only real change on the track is just a smaller saturation, just to give the kick a bit more of a boost. Now, whenever I got some feedback for this track on the Techno Production subreddit, a couple of people seemed to think that the kick lacked body and maybe could have done with being a bit punchier. Maybe I could have used some parallel compression and made the kick a bit beefier, or maybe layered in another kick underneath. Do you think the kick lacks some body, some character? Do you think it could do with a bit more? Leave a comment down below. I'd be interested to know what you think. And then lastly, all I've done here is just duplicate the track. So here we got the full loop. The second one, I've rolled off all the high end to get rid of the percussion, so it just sounds like the kick. Yeah, you can still hear a little bit of the top end, but when that's mixed in with the rest of the track, it just sounds like the kick. And then here we got drums, we got the same as this, but with basically the kick taken out. And then finally we have no percussion and no bass in the kick drum, so it's just a very high kick basically. Now moving on to the second chord down here, this sounds like this. After creating the first lead, I felt like I needed something to complement it and to fill in the gaps of time left by the first lead. Because you can see there's a lot of time, even with the delay, there's still a lot of unused time here. Now, a lot of dub techno tracks will be happy to leave this space sort of unoccupied and to let the track breathe a little bit more. But I wanted to take a slightly different approach and create sort of a crossover between a more energetic techno track and dub techno. So I created this second lead to essentially, fill in the gap left in between. I seem to remember I just duplicated the first lead and started messing around on my typing keyboard and trying to come up with a melody to fit in between it, which is when I sort of stumbled across this sort of short, sharp, repetitive sound. What it does do quite nicely is contrast the first lead sound, as the first lead sound is quite big, it's quite anthemic, and then you've got, as I mentioned, it's sort of the daddy of the track, and then you come down here and you've got the short, sharp, repetitive, quick, stabby sound. There's quite a big contrast between the two sounds. They obviously sound very similar as they're the same patch, but there's definitely a size difference between the two. But despite it being essentially the same patch in the ES2, the only real difference here is that I've got an LFO on a cutoff which is changing quite a lot, you can hear. You can really hear the filter, or the bandpass filter, really moving up and down as the melody plays. But as well as that difference, the main sort of sonic difference, because I've still got the same saturation, overdrive, and chorus on there. The main difference here is the isotope vinyl again, but the key difference here is I'm using the 1950 preset, which is essentially reducing the frequency range. There's making it sound very thin, taking away all the higher frequencies, taking away the low frequencies, and giving it sort of a bit crusher effect. I guess you could say I just made it a bit more lo-fi, as that seems to be a music producer buzzword at the moment. But after messing around with the arrangements of the track, I felt that there needed to be a bit of contrast between part 1 and part 2 of the track. So I could avoid essentially just copying and pasting the first part into the second part. I felt like there needed to be a distinction between the two parts, and that's where if we can do this right, moving around the project in Logic, I haven't worked out keyboard shortcuts and stuff, so this is really fiddly for me. Here we go. Isotope vinyl, the year. As you can see, for the second part, it's setting 1, and at the second part, it's setting 5, which is the decade 2000. So basically, it sounds a lot more modern, a lot more big. There's a lot more frequency range to it, and it sounds like this. It's not being crushed anymore. There's a lot more high frequency presence. It's got a bit of body in it as well, compared to this part. It's very thin, it sounds massive on the reverb, whereas over here it sort of takes over the reverb a little bit more. Now, as well as this decade change, the other distinction the other change I made to make it more distinct is I've changed the octave. So over here it's in the 3rd and the 4th octaves, whereas the first one it's playing the 2nd. But what I've also done, with this 4th octave, is I've taken random notes and specifically they are random and not every second or every sixth note. They are specifically random. Yeah, much like how the LFO on the cutoff here, because it's not bound to the BPM and the time division. It's just it's moving around freely, the cutoff filter. So it makes the LFO movement very random, and you're not sure what it's going to do. And that's the same with these notes here, because they're random. They play completely random notes. Yeah, some of the notes that are above, you can't tell when they're going to come in because they're random, and that's the same with the LFO as well. It gives the track a load more variation whenever you, the listener, whenever you're not sure what the sound is going to do. To me, that makes a song sound way more interesting. And it's this sort of level of unpredictability that I think will give the listener a reason to continue listening, as they'll keep listening to the track thinking, okay, what's this lead going to do? They try and understand it a little bit more, so they continue to listen to the song to try and work out what's going on. This is something, to me anyway, that I really want to sort of explore a bit more, and something I love hearing in music as well. And then the last couple of automation parts that we have going on, we have the cutoff filter again, much like the same on the lead one, and the decay as well. So we get some distinction between the sounds as well. Again, sort of the idea of less is more, having a sound evolve throughout a track and giving it more variety over the course of the track. Now moving on to the bass sound, which will be over here. Again, using the ES2 for this. Yeah, it's essentially the same patch, but I'm just using the first oscillator this time. Same envelope, but I'm using a low pass filter really to get a lot of the high ends out. So it sounds just more bassy, as you can hear. And if we take away the saturation and overdrive, very, very subby. And then whenever I bring in the overdrive and saturation, yeah, I've got so much overdrive going on here. And loads of saturation too. So the first one sounds like this. And then we got the overdrive. I think that sounds more interesting than just opening up the filter to allow some of the more high frequencies through. If we artificially create those high frequencies through saturation and overdriving the sound, I think to me that sound, it gives, especially on a bass sound, it gives a sound more texture, more oomph as well. And also what I've done here is I've removed 30, or rolled off about 30 hertz to give myself some headroom, as I'm fairly certain 99% of the people listening to this track are not going to be hearing anything less than 30 or 40 hertz, unless for whatever reason this song blows up and starts getting played in clubs. Then I highly doubt anyone is really going to be appreciating these frequencies. Yeah, if it does for whatever reason get super popular, then yeah, maybe I'll remix it and give it some more lower frequencies. But yeah, to save myself some headroom in the mixing and mastering stage, I've just rolled off these frequencies as they're simply not needed. Now, interestingly, what I've also done is sent it to a delay and a reverb send. Usually you wouldn't do this with an electronic track, but as the song is more about the sort of chilling atmosphere, I wanted to help reinforce that idea by having the bass play perhaps a less supportive role and have it interact more with the other sounds. Now, to get around the potential issue of the bass and the delay swamping the lower frequencies, as you can see here, I've just rolled off, everything up to 140 hertz. And yeah, again, 140 hertz, just so these the lower frequencies aren't being swamped with the delay and reverb, which can make it mix very, very muddy. This is something that I've started to do just by default whenever I'm setting up my delay and reverb sends. Now, funnily enough, just like lead 2, I created this melody, using my MIDI keyboard here. I do actually have a genuine MIDI keyboard, an Akai MPK 25 sat in front of me, but it's set here with a dust cover on it, and I just don't use it that often. More often than not, I'll just press Command K, start playing in a melody like that. Now, what I did to help the bass be a more integral part of the song, I added the same automation of the filter and the decay, much like lead 1 and lead 2. as you can hear here. Yeah, by having the same automation of the same parts as lead 1 and lead 2, it helps the bass be a part of the song rather than just be the supporting thing that goes underneath, creating a groove or whatever, filling those lower frequencies. It actually has a part to play in transitioning the breakdown from this part of the song to this part of the song. Now, looking back at the bass sound, I think I maybe could have made it a bit more sort of round. Whenever you listen to it, it's quite monotone, it's quite static. I could have done with maybe making it a bit more round. Maybe one way I could have done this would be to add an envelope on the filter, so it gently closes the closes the filter on the release of the sound, making it perhaps sound a bit warmer, a bit rounder. Yeah, some more feedback I got on the techno production subreddit was someone suggested making the sound more subby and perhaps less prominent. I understood their point, and this is probably a more typical way of going about things in dub techno. But I really like how the sound complemented lead one and lead two. But I really like how the sounds complemented lead 1 and lead 2. Yeah, maybe I could have reduced some of the distortion or made an envelope on the filter to sort of close off the tail of the sound, and that would have helped it sit back in the mix a little bit more. But I was very happy with the outcome of the bass anyway. Now, at the beginning, we have this sort of impact sound. It sounds like this. And this is simply a preset from Sculpture, which is a synth that comes with Logic. Now, I've never used it before, and I've got to be honest, I have no idea how it works. Is it just a glorified sampler, a bit like Omnisphere, or is there more to it than that? If someone does know how to use Sculpture, then leave a comment below, because I'm curious to see actually what this synth is. But yeah, I just wanted to experiment and see if I could add another element to the track, something that was a little bit different to the chords and the bass line that I already had. Now, what this Dancing Anvil preset does do is it helps give the track a signature sound, a consistent idea across the whole track that's recognizable. To give the track that chilling atmosphere that I was aiming for, what I've done is added loads of reverb and a bit of distortion on the sound as well. As we can see, mixes up to 100, 11 seconds decay time. And what it sounds, without it, it just sounds like this. It's getting there with the sort of chilling atmosphere, but chuck a massive reverb on there. And then some distortion as well. The distortion helps it give it an even longer reverb tail and some extra impact as well. Plus it's got this very crackly, resonant, distorted sounds in the left and the right channels that help give it sort of a very analog, gritty feel. And then the riser that I have here as well is basically just white noise with a tremolo and the filter that I've automated. Yeah, that's pretty standard stuff when it comes to building up tension in a song. As I was going for quite a non-traditional dub techno track, I didn't want the track to feel too empty and sparse. I felt like I needed to add a couple of extra pieces of percussion to keep the track interesting. Now, this comes from my background of listening to more club-based techno tracks, where the listener's attention spans are probably a little bit shorter. So anyway, I was scrolling through Loop Cloud, seeing if I could find some inspiration or some samples or some funky sounds to add to it. And I came across this sort of metallic percussion sound. And what I've done with it is just chop it up and sprinkle it all across the track in quite a rhythmic and quite robotic way. Yep, there's just some simple EQ, and I've got some quite extreme panning going on as well, just to give the sound some interest and give the hard left and the hard right channel just a little bit of interest. Then I've got this funky sounding vocal. Almost sounds quite robotic and quite actually matches the sort of industrial metallic percussion loop. Now this sound here, I'll talk about this in a second. Yeah, and on this vocal, what we got is it's heavily side chained to the kick to give it some rhythm, and it's also got quite a creative delay from the delay designer. If it sounds like this, it sounds without it, and then with it. Now this vocal, as we can see here, only appears in the second half of the song. Now, alongside the second lead, which we've changed sonically, this is really helping the song have two distinct parts, two distinct halves. This idea of having sounds that only appear in certain parts of the song is something I really need to do more in order to retain the listener's interest and also keep the track from sounding less repetitive. Although saying that, a lot of dub techno is very repetitive anyway, so that's kind of a contradicting statement. But I like to think I'm doing something different by merging sort of club-based techno and dub techno together. Now, the last couple of bits to mention here, I wanted to add some Foley type sounds in the percussion to add sort of an extra dynamic to the drums. And yeah, that sort of white noise feedback sound that we keep hearing is actually coming from, where are we? Yeah, right, it's coming from Glitch Machine's Fracture. All of the drums are being sent here, yeah, as I wanted to create some sort of Foley sounds within the percussion. But it didn't quite work out as I was hoping to. So what I ended up doing, for some reason, is adding Valhalla's frequency echo. And as we can see in the automation here, every so often, every 16 bars or whatever, the feedback is increasing, as we can hear here. What it's doing is really help the song transition from one part to the next, and also helps with the idea of the song having a distinct and recognizable sound throughout, like the sculpture dancing anvil sound. Now, the final thing to note here is I've automated on the master channel Ozone Imager. Now, what happens during the breakdown is the Ozone Imager, it pulls the sound in by reducing the width, and then suddenly, at this point here, what it's doing is releasing this sudden burst of anthemic energy in the whole song, and it sounds like this. Yeah, all of a sudden there's this real burst of energy as the first lead comes back in and it's really pushed out to the sides. This isn't really an idea that's associated with dub techno that often. Having a big sort of hands in the air moment isn't really what the genre is about. But I really liked it and I thought it was something really different for the genre, and to be honest, nobody's told me that it doesn't work. So I'd like to think that I've gotten away with it and it does work. So yeah, I think that just about wraps up this video. If you feel like you learned anything from this video, any cool production techniques, leave a like and leave a comment, telling me what you learned. I'd love to know if you did find this video useful. If you want me to cover how I mastered the track, leave a comment as well and let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. The track is available to stream on all major platforms. If you head to the link down below, you can stream it, add it to your playlist, do whatever. So yeah, anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!